are a diabetic, if you really get that cholesterol way, way, way down, it protects the health of those diabetics. And along with the statins, which are now regularly recommended for diabetics as well as people with angina and heart attack, is that they are to have either an ACE inhibitor like lisinopril or monopril or fosinapril, or an ARB like Benicar. Many of these people are also now being treated with certain of the beta blockers. The first one was Coreg, and now there is this new one, Bistolic. I have a particular interest in this Bistolic. I was invited to a conference on it, and I am starting to use it. It has an interesting method of action. It releases nitric oxide, which opens the blood vessels. If you remember, I talked about how antioxidants reduce the stiffness of the blood vessels, and getting the cholesterol reduces the stiffness. That's exactly the same idea here. Get that cholesterol way, 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 way down to soften those blood vessels up. Ischemia resolved in type 2 diabetes. Now this is the same part of that. Ischemia is inadequate blood flow to the heart muscle. And you don't want to have inadequate blood flow to the heart muscle because that's what causes heart attack. So if you get the cholesterol down, it tends to hold those blood vessels open and not allow hardening of the arteries, plaque to occur, even though one remains diabetic. So get that cholesterol down, subtract the good cholesterol from the total, and that number needs to be less than 90. Calorie countdown. This article is about being essentially whole foods vegetarian as opposed to other forms. Quick reversal of symptoms in Alzheimer's in a patient who was treated with etanercept, which I believe is Enbrel, probably for their rheumatoid arthritis, either that or their psoriasis. I think that's what it's used to. And what happened, remember the deep brain stimulation that I talked about earlier? This one basically says that if you use this Enbrel, it may help improve memory. It is an anti-inflammatory, and it does have something to do with the development of Alzheimer's as well as many diseases, heart attack and cancers. Despite doubts, cancer therapy draws patients. And this is about going to Mexico to get treatments that you cannot get here in the United States. And I will say that I've talked to people who've gone to Mexico, the Virgin Islands, I think, or the Bahamas. Yes, it was the Bahamas, and gotten these therapies which are not really available in continental United States. And I would encourage people to look into not only the conventional Western therapies. Here, I tend to use the hematologist Joel Silver. I like him a lot. And, but also to look into the alternative therapies. So if you need some guidance on that, please call me at the Preventive Medicine Center at 549-3444. This is about green cars, and this was an email letter that I sent to a very bright fellow by the name of Doug, D-U-G, Tarnopol, T-A-R-N-O-P-O-L. And he has the most intellectual site. You might see if you can find him. His information is just so intellectual. So if you need your IQ lifted, contact Doug Tarnopol, get on his email list, and he will raise your IQ. But because he is so smart, I wrote him a letter and I said, tell me about cars. See, this new smart car is coming out, and then there's going to be the Fiat 500. And he said, tell me about, I said to him, tell me about what to do to make a green decision, eco-friendly decision, how to get the best mileage, and so on and so on. Well, he said he knew someone, Dave Comides, who is in Los Angeles. He does multiple things, but one of his interests is in green cars. So the name of these emails became Green, let's see, what was it called? Corporate Greenery or Green Cars. In other words, were the corporations just fooling around making a lot of noise, or were they really doing something? Specifically, he mentioned one site that caught my attention, APTERA, preventive.com. And he also mentioned the MDI air car. And this is a car that compresses air by virtue of solar panels on its top, and so it runs on air, compressed air. And that is, of course, completely green, except for the production of the panels and the car itself. But Aptera has cars that are going to be able to give you 300 miles as a gas hybrid, or if you get the all-electric version, that'll get you 120 miles to the gallon. Now, these are the ways to be thinking. We need to think about Aptera, MDI, and these greener cars. I had a patient today who was diabetic, who I placed on a statin, who regularly tells me she doesn't want any prescription medications, and yes, I already told you the story. But I told her that she needed to go on to something that was effective, and what I showed her here was an article about people who've had reactions to Zocor, Vytorin, Lipitor, and there is one statin out there that is so effective, it can be given once a week. And so what I ended up doing is starting off with 10 milligrams, half every other tablet for a couple of weeks, and then one every other day for a couple of weeks, then one a day for a couple of weeks, and then two a day. And two a day on a Monday, 1 day a week. That's the only day she's going to take her Crestor, because it is so strong and so effective. Now, we will see what she does. She sort of already warned me, well, if I get side effects, I'm going to throw this right out the window. Well, not a great idea, but at least she was agreeable and listened to that. Here is an article about irritable bowel pain, more severe in women who are abused. Oops, camera slipped down. So there we go. If you've had a major stressor in your life, if you've been abused, if you had the death of a parent at a very young age, but you were able to recognize it, if your house burned down, if you were not connected to your parents, you are more likely to have physical ailments and physical complaints. And a general rule that I have told patients recently is, and I mean this half humorously but half seriously, you're only allowed to have 3 complaints. And if you have more than 3 complaints, basically it tells me something else is going on. You can't have back pain, abdominal pain, headaches, shortness of breath, difficulty sleeping, dark urination, indigestion, change in your bowel habits, and not realize that that is probably part of what's called a somatoform, which means body conversion, or part of an anxiety reaction. Now, to say somebody's anxious doesn't really answer the story. The real question is, why are they anxious? And I tried to give you a hint. These people probably are disconnected. They are threatened in some fashion. They did not have a proper relationship with their parents. And they need to go through a kind of rebirthing concept. So these women who have irritable bowel and have been abused, if you don't approach the psychological, you're not going to be able to adequately help them. I'm not saying that our medicines are not helpful for that. I'm saying that you can really help them immensely if one also gets into the psychological. Here was one that I thought was an article that I thought was particularly motivating.